things. So let's change it back to browser router. But that means we can't host it on GitHub pages. Do you have a question? The other way? Oh, yeah, that's a separate issue. Yeah, good one. Good one. So you should get an error that says basically that host isn't allowed, right? Is that what you get? Yep. So and it's actually, the error message is super specific and actually tells you how to fix it. It says in the Firebase console, go to the auth section, go to the sign-in method tab, and then there's a section for authorized domain. You need to add a domain, and you need to add, your GitHub username .github.io to the list of domains that are authorized. That'll do it. So that means authentication requests for this app can come from that URL. This keeps other people from being able to use this with you, even if they have your API key and stuff. So yeah, if you're going to try to do this from GitHub pages, you need to make sure to whitelist the GitHub pages domain. It automatically whitelists firebaseapp.com. So now that we've changed this back to browser router, we could use a host that just supports this instead of GitHub pages, which doesn't. So by the way, the other way to fix GitHub pages, if you want to keep using the browser router instead of hash router, is by tricking it with a 404 page. So you can make your 404 page identical to your index.html page. If you put a 404.html in a GitHub project, it'll use that as your 404 page. So if you just make that just like your index.html page, that'll work. Now, you'll be getting 404 responses from the server instead of 200 OK responses, which isn't great, but it does work if you want to do it that way. But in this deployment section, there are other hosts we can use. We could use Microsoft Azure. We could use Firebase. Well, we're already using Firebase. That seems like, why didn't you have us do this all along? Because GitHub Pages is nice, and you can use it most of the time. But yeah, how about we use Firebase? You probably don't already have the Firebase CLI, or command line interface. So if you don't, you can install it using yarn add global Firebase Tools. Or for some of you, I know doing yarn add global create React app didn't work. You had to use npm install -g. So you could use npm install -g Firebase Tools instead. It is much slower, but you may have to do that if you finish installing this and the Firebase command still doesn't work from the command line. So yarn add global Firebase Tools or npm install -g Firebase Tools. And that'll give you the Firebase command from the command line, which will let us follow the rest of these steps. So notice the notes here. You run Firebase init in your project. Run Firebase init in your project. Yep. Okay, that's a little. Run Firebase init in your project. Choose the hosting, configure and deploy Firebase hosting sites. Choose the Firebase project you created in the previous step. You will need to agree with database rules JSON being created, but we've already done that. So choose build as the public directory. This is the one that's easy to miss. It will default to public. But when you run deploy, you may remember it also runs build in the background, and it compiles all of your JSX into real JavaScript, and it puts it inside the build folder. So we need to make sure it knows that build is the public directory. And then it'll ask, do you want to configure it as a single page app and route all requests to index.html. That's exactly what we want to do. That's the big advantage of using Firebase over GitHub Pages here. So say yes when it asks. So let's see it. Firebase init. Okay. Which features do you want? Hosting. Arrow down to hosting. Hit spacebar. Enter. Okay. Which one? How about Notes 18 S1 afternoon? What do you want to use as your public directory? It defaults to public. We want to say build. Configure as a single page app. That is, rewrite all URLs to index.html. Yes. That's exactly what we want to do. File build index.html already exists. I'm going to say no. Don't overwrite. I don't think it'll matter because every time we deploy, it'll overwrite it anyway. So, okay, that's done. Now, if I say yarn, well, yarn deploy is still set to do the other thing. It says to run Firebase deploy. It also says we need to do this. I'm going to skip this for right now and just try yarn deploy or Firebase deploy. Firebase deploy. Okay, it worked. Here's my URL, https notes18s1afternoon.firebaseapp.com. Yeah.
After running the Firebase Tools yarn add, it still says command not found when I try to do Firebase.
You used the yarn version?
Yeah.
First, try opening a new tab or new window of your terminal and try again. If that doesn't work, then use npm install-g. It may be that it's not installing it to the right path. So, okay, I've got this URL now. Remember when we first configured package.json to for GitHub Pages? We had to add homepage in here. Well, this is now the wrong homepage. So be sure to change this to your Firebase URL. Otherwise, it's going to write all your URLs wrong. So after I change that, I need to run Firebase deploy again. Nope, sorry. I do need to build this thing still, so yarn build, then Firebase deploy. So I need to actually update my build folder. We'll fix that so that's all one step again. Okay. Ready to be deployed, Firebase deploy. Let's check it out. There it is. Now let's try signing in. I don't need to whitelist that because it's already Firebase. Firebase trusts itself. If you're accessing the same database, accessing the database of the same project you're hosting at, that works just fine. And when I click on these, I get /notes/ whatever without the hash, which is nicer. I hit refresh, and it works. I can use React Router the way it was intended. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL into my GitHub settings here, since this works a little better. So I'll say edit, change the URL to my Firebase URL. Now ideally, we don't want to have to remember to build every time we deploy. So if we change package.json so that the deploy script just runs Firebase deploy. I may have to add Firebase Tools as a dependency now, or at least a dev dependency. So I'm going to run yarn add Firebase Tools. So that'll put Firebase Tools in my package.json. So that way this Firebase command should actually work. Let's see if it does. See if I say yarn deploy now. It runs build. Then it runs Firebase deploy. So now I'm back to just one command to do both. And still works. Cool. So configure for Firebase hosting.